Hello, and welcome to Right Here, Right Queer. I am RK Ashwick, and I am here today with author Lila Mary, who writes queer fantasy romance. Say hi, Lila.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Alrighty, to kick us off, which of your books are you most excited to talk about today, and why?
Today I'm talking about After the Order, which is my upcoming companion piece to my finished and complete Order Trilogy. It's not technically a sequel, but it is the wrap up to this trilogy that has lived in my heart for so long. It's my way of saying goodbye to the world and helping the readers also say goodbye to the world.
That's fantastic. I really love companion books just because after knowing the characters for so long, it's just so nice to get a different perspective on them and just be able to show the world in a different way, show them in a different light. It's a nice way for authors to kind of stretch something that they've already been working in so much. So that's very, very cool. Do you have a favorite character you've created? And this can be within After the Order, or it can be a totally different character if you want.
Yeah, so for After the Order, it's in the perspective of Brander, who was a side character in the Order trilogy, but a very prominent side character. So he's one of my favorites in After the Order, definitely. There are two others as well. That's one of them his boyfriend come fiance. One of them is their mutual old friend, who are all tired old men reminiscing on their past as the best of friends, and there is a bit of attraction between them all in varying degrees because the plot of After the Order is that Brander and Ivan, his fiance, go back across an ocean to this snowy landscape where they 20 years ago, that's where they met, that's where they had some wonderful memories together, and they're healing from their trauma there. But some things happen with their friend Timur that was really fun to write. So all of them are kind of tied in my mind for who my favorite character is in this book.
That's absolutely fair. I love that Brander A gets kind of a bit of a rest, and B, I love that it's about Brander because I feel like in all the excerpts you've ever shared of the Order, his personality always stands out so much. So that's super fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. So what drew you to your subgenre, which I think in this case would be queer fantasy romance? Or really, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more high fantasy queer romance?
Yes, it is. Some of my books I would classify as romance fantasy novels, like romance novels first. Some of them are fantasy novels with romance. There's a difference. This one is more fantasy with romance. But I digress. I love writing queer fantasy romance just overall so much because growing up, I didn't see a lot of queer characters in fantasy, in books or movies. And if there were, they were never the main characters. And if they were, it was in an indie book or a tiny book that no one I had ever known had read. And so the ones that I did find were so precious to me because it made me think it's possible to write a fantasy world with no homophobia or transphobia in it. It's possible to write a fantasy world with trans characters who are not ridiculed and who are just normal and chill and part of the fantasy system. And so that's what drew me to that subgenre, is just this realization I had as a kid that I don't have to write homophobia into my worlds. I can just do whatever I want because it's fantasy.
That's true. And I feel like that's something a lot of readers are looking for as well.
Yeah.
You know what, kind of related to you talking about books that you read in the past and sort of wanted to, write what you weren't seeing in them. What stories inspire you?
There's an author, I believe she is indie, named Megan Dare, who is on Tumblr, funnily enough, where she has dozens and dozens of queer fantasy novels, queer fantasy romance novels that really inspired me. And she has no homophobia or transphobia in her worlds. Her main characters are always queer. Her trans characters are just part of the world existing. They're not an anomaly. And the way that she wove gender and sexuality into her world building, as in people having jewelry that indicated what gender they were. I see that all the time in the books I read now, and your books even. But growing up, that was just mind blowing to me when I read those books. And so she is always my idol, my messiah for queer fantasy, because it was the first I had ever seen. And of course, there are the master craftsmen of fantasy world building like Sanderson, or I really love the books by C.S. Pacat as well, like Dark Rise and Captive Prince were also some huge inspirations for me.
For sure. Now, just so I can look up this author, do you know how to spell Megan's last name?
Derr.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my favorite book of hers is called The High King's Golden Tongue. It's part of a series of romances all in the same cast of people. The first book is about this one couple, and then as you move through the series, the side characters from the first book all are falling in love on their own, and now they're the main characters. So it's really fun.
That's so fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it when it's you get to like a series can explore different characters within the same cast. So you kind of like take your time with like developing each one.
Yes, definitely.
That's super fun. I think both to write and to read, honestly. So kind of related to that, what are some themes that you like to explore or revisit in your writing?
Well, I always say I love to write about powerful people falling in love. And I love really taking the concept that maybe you would see in a rom com movie, like a modern rom com movie, and turning it into a fantasy premise. Because fantasy deserves to have fun, silly rom coms as well. Characters deserve to get to fall in love in, like, spilling coffee on each other when they're running late for a meeting. But how do you make that into a fantasy premise? Because I love to live in the world of fantasy and I love like joy and whimsy in my fantasy. So, however, I can include that. I love genre blending like that.
That is super fun. I love that. Now I'm just picturing like two wizards spilling coffee on each other before their wizard meeting at the orb.
Or like spilling potions on each other or something.
Mm-hmm. 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 What drives your storytelling? What motivates you to write?
Well, I'm always thinking of queer readers when I write. They're my target audience. I write for the girls and the gays and the theys, and I always will. So I'm driven to write, hopefully, as is every author's dream, that I write someone's favorite book. Who doesn't have that wish when they're writing a book? But I'm really driven to write stories for queer readers and to bring queer readers together and like give them a sense of community and just make books for people to bond over the way that I would bond over queer books with my queer friends growing up. So I just want to like contribute some art to my community that's a little bit fun, a little bit silly, a little bit sexy, and just help them escape from the world for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of goes in hand in with what you said about, wanting to write someone's favorite book, which, like, of course, I mean, that's every author's dream, right? What else do you hope to accomplish with your stories?
I want to show queer people that there's always room in stories for us, that we do not have to be the side characters, that we can be the main characters falling in love. And also to give people the courage to write exactly what they want to write without fear of censorship. Like, I want people to write something because it is self indulgent and because they think, I've never seen this story told before. That's exactly why you should write it, because there is absolutely someone who wants to read it. So I'm always like encouraging writers to cast the shame off their shoulders and to write exactly what they want as self-indulgently as possible, because it will almost always be received with love if you find the right readers.
The world is big. There is always going to be someone out there who is going to love your book. Like, there's just too many readers for that not to be true. And I think as soon as you start shying away from being self-indulgent and shying away from what you really want to write, I think it like shows in the writing, and it just gets harder to write. For me, at least, it gets harder to get the words out if I'm not 100% vibing with what I'm working on.
Yeah, and I think readers can tell too when you're not super in love with what you're writing. It really does show.
What's the number one thing you want readers to take away from your books?
Honestly, it's to make your art a little bit weirder, a little bit more niche, a little bit darker. I saw a great quote once. I wish I could credit the person who said it, but it was like, be kinder to people in real life and make your art weirder. That's like the rules to live by. Is like any weird things that you would say to a person, save it for your art. Because to me, I've always preferred weirder art and like darker art. Like if there's a bunch of like content warnings on a horror novel, I'm like, that's more enticing to me. That makes me want to read it more than a super sanitized novel. It's just personal preference, of course. Everybody's different, but I love weird niche art that's, pushing the needle a bit. So I want readers to have that sense of encouragement and almost permission after reading my books and like hearing me talk about how much I am passionate about this, because I really am, especially with, like censorship and just the nightmare of this world.
Yeah.
Like, write your weird art, please.
Yeah, I find that like weird stuff, it's always coming from a unique perspective. And I feel like we always need more of that, because otherwise, yeah, you're right, everything is kind of sanitized and cookie cutter, and that's not what we want art to be. So yes, absolutely. Do you have any other advice for aspiring authors?
At least when you're starting, when you're writing like your first draft, write exactly what you want it to be without fear of, will other people like this? Will this sell? without like taking anyone's opinion or voice in your head into account, because that is the most authentic and perfect story you can tell. And maybe like when you're editing and if you are looking to publish and make money, then you can like change some things for marketability. But when you're first writing that draft, I think it's almost like you're betraying yourself if you're not writing this most authentic story that only you can tell, and the self-indulgent story, because like I said earlier, your ideal audience exists. It's just a matter of finding them, no matter how niche or weird your story is. The world is big, as you said. And in my opinion, like history will always look back on the weird art that stood out as like the lovable art instead of the art that conformed to what it was supposed to be for the time. Like, I'm sure when it came out, Frankenstein was a very new novel that had never really been seen before, but look at what it is now, you know? So just write what you want, I would say, to aspiring authors.
I agree with that. Yeah, particularly for first drafts, like if you're already, self-censoring and second guessing yourself at the first draft, you're just sort of like kneecapping the whole process, because I feel like it'll only snowball from there. Like the first draft is where like nobody has to see it.
Oh yeah.
It can, the word that you don't even have to write full sentences for that
Yeah.
thing. Like you just let it be whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, that thing can look like a dumpster fire, and that's the way it's supposed to look.
Absolutely. All right. And finally, where can listeners find you and your work?
You can find me on my website, lilamarybooks.com. I am on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all Lila Mary Books, the same username, no spaces. I post every day on Instagram and TikTok, and I make YouTube videos weekly. And you can find my books on my website. After the Order is coming out on November 4th, it will be the goodbye send-off to the Order Trilogy as we wrap up the year before I get into some entirely new worlds in the 2026 publishing schedule.
And congrats on that, by the way, on both wrapping a trilogy and, having that companion piece to say goodbye to the characters. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, thank you. It was such a pleasure to write.
As it should be.
Yeah.
It should be self-indulgent, as you said. And for this podcast, you can find us at Right Here, Right Queer Podcast on Instagram. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you at the next one.